I'd actually like to introduce a colleague of mine from the Institute for Church Life, Esther Terry, director of our Camino online theology for Spanish-speaking Catholics. That's housed in STEP, which is our online theology program at the Institute. And she will introduce our speaker for this late morning session.
Well, good morning. I hope everyone's enjoying the symposium. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Tim. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Dora Tobar, who is a remarkable scholar and pastoral leader. One interesting fact about Dora is that she is one of the first women theologians from her home country of Colombia. With the support and encouragement of her local bishop, together with one other girlfriend, she studied theology at the Javeriana University in Bogota, in a program that had previously been reserved for seminarians. She received her bachelor's and master's in theology there, and then completed doctoral studies at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, writing her thesis on theological anthropology. She returned to Colombia and taught for a number of years, both in the seminary and at the Javeriana University in Cali. When she and her husband Dominique moved to Washington, D.C., she served as a parish director of religious education and became involved in a number of Hispanic ministry initiatives, including outreach to women and family catechesis. She also collaborated in faith formation programs offered through the Catholic University of America. Dora has contributed to many projects, including the USCCB's Spanish language website, portumatrimonio.org, which provides marriage enrichment resources. She also assisted in the creation of a family Bible in Spanish and the development of the youth program Pareja Feliz, which teaches young people about chastity and healthy relationships. She's also created an online course for our very own Camino program here at the Institute for Church Life. Dora frequently travels to give workshops on theology, spirituality, and family life. She currently serves as the director of the Pastoral Office for Family Life and Hispanic Ministry in the Diocese of Lafayette, Indiana, where she lives with her husband and 2 sons. Let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Dora Tobar. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It is a big honor to be here and share with you some of these talks about popular culture and liturgy in the new evangelization. Of course, the context in which we will consider the possible place and participation of the popular culture in liturgy in the new evangelization is the new evangelization challenges. This means the search that the new evangelization entails for new symbols and language that could bring back to the pew all of those who have left the church and do not identify themselves anymore with our practices. Many questions are then implicit in this purpose. For example, what is needed in the liturgy in order to warm up the hearts and minds of the baptizer with the alive presence of the resurrected one? Why the current liturgical language and gestures were unable to keep in their pew all of those baptized that today define themselves as secularized culture? If secularized culture is the extended one, could we consider in amount the popular culture of today? In the process of today's church efforts for inculturization in a new evangelization, what kind of relationship could be established between the popular culture, the secularized culture, and the sacred in liturgy? Of course, a lot of questions that I will be unable to answer completely. Only I would like to provoke for you a way to see the reality as I perceive it, and as all together, what could that mean for us as church today? So, all of us, we know that we are in a period of new evangelization. Everything had been talked about, this big problem or challenge, whatever, the church has been revising itself in many ways, and since Vatican II until today. But I like the invitation that the Evangelii Gaudium of Pope Francis is giving us to shift the attention from what is happening inside to our church to watch what is happening outside. You know, going forward to the suburban areas and sympathize with them. So with this purpose, I will invite you to go into a summarized and quick vision of what is popular today. So this is why we will consider what kind of popular cultures are today in our midst. What is our reality? First, let's try to define what popular could mean. So, in the cultural anthropology, popular is the adjective that refers to what is general, common, extended, or typical of a population, culture, and tradition. At that point, that it could be understood as something original or genuine born from a collectivity. It could be seen as the reality that belongs to the word expression of a non-specialized or non-sophisticated group in comparison with a sophisticated or illustrated one. In this case, popular can also refer to the non-official or non-institutional establishment. In the area of popular religiosity, what is popular is also, but in nature, a lay cultural experience that identifies the way common believers, and not only the official leaders of a religion, perceive and express their faith. Popular is also has a deep theological relevance. In the Bible, what is common to people is also close to God's heart. God listened to people's cries and invite us to listen and answer those needs as we were assuring and serving God himself, as Matthew 25 says. In this way, popular cultures become a theological locus, a sign of the times, where seeds of the verbum have already been planted and are waiting to be cultured and one day harvest. In North America Church, we have in our landscape, we can say, at least these three main cultural bases. We can talk about of secularized spiritual culture, Hispanic popular piety, and charismatic Hispanic movement that at some point could be putting together. But let's start first what is more popular, more extended, the secularized culture, which secularized spiritual culture, which means almost a contradiction. However, in order to make sense and try to describe what it means, I am following David Tese, a scholar from Australia who has been reading a lot of books and analyzing this phenomenon, to, trying to make sense about what secular, popular spirituality is. He's talking about a spirituality revolution, talking about this particular experience. And talking about that, he says that refers to the kind of cultural religious shift behind today's secular culture, and describes this as the emergency of a secret as a leading force in contemporary society. And that is marked by ironical contradiction. Our secular society, says Stacy, has given birth to a sense of sacred, and yet our sacred traditions are failing to recognize its spiritual potentiality. Another big sociologist studying also the phenomena today, conditions Bauman, conceived with Tacy, Sigmund Bauman, conceived with Tacy and found that the emergence of this new form of spirituality is rooted in the existential disappointment and desperate lack of possibilities left behind by the end of the modern era. We are in the presence of a great historical shift at the secular period, which aroused with humanism and intellectual enlightenment, draws to the end. Most of our knowledge and institutions are products of this enlightenment, and as such, they do not reach out beyond the present or shows us any way for the future. They are frustrated inadequately, with little to tell about our situations. The old cultural wineskins cannot contain the new wine of the Spirit, and that is why we have so much instability, says Daisy, much uncertainty, disruptions, and anxiety. We need to make a new pact with the sacred in the archetypical forces in order to make sense and give an answer. So let's say what kind of characteristics we can identify in this kind of religiosity or spirituality. So the main big characteristic is that this kind of new spirituality that is confused, and it is described in many ways by all the experience and religiosities that you know as New Age, that combine, search for all mythicism cults, all religious paganismos, Wicca, ancient Greek agents, Greek and Tibet, Hermetismos, astrology, all of these kind of things together. The main characteristic is that this spirituality is without any form. And this is pretty disturbing. You cannot put it in a particular definition. It's without form, without a practical structure, or a concrete list of symbols or denomination. This disturbing formality is, however, something to be expected in periods of transition. In stable cultural times, explained Tacy, the Spirit is successfully contained by symbolic forms, and Spirit is at home in religious traditions. In unstable times as ours, the symbolic form is experienced as constraining, limiting, anachronic. And the Spirit struggles to break from those traditions to express itself. That's what is happening now. This is why this kind of formality or structural religion experience of the spirituality. So, and that means that is why, because it doesn't belong to a particular religion, is defined as secular. Politically, we say lay experience. But if you see psychologists, securities, counselors, pastorals, advisors, spiritual director knows how thirsty people is for spiritual connections. So even though this is a secular religion experience, doesn't mean that it's not spiritual. That's the main point. So let's see what kind of, and because these are religious, most of their characteristics are defined by contrast with the religious traditions. So this is why we will see, for example, spiritual spontaneity means that the spirit is felt to be spontaneous, freely available, and democratically structured, whereas religion is perceived to be doctrinal, regulated, authoritarian. Another characteristic is search for holiness and holistic integration in reality, where natural and supernatural could be related. And we know, I made my thesis in relationship between nature and supernatural in the new theology of French movement before Vatican II. And we see that how marked we are still in theological language, for example, for the Thomist era. And the director of my thesis, today, the secretary for the Congregation of Faith in the Vatican, Monsignor Ladaria, he wrote a book that it is not yet took seriously. He said the problem of this kind of language, supernatural, is that we ignore that is not dimension on our reality outside Christ. Everything was created in Christ. But we have not yet took all the consequences in our language, in our theological perspective of that reality. Nothing is out of God from that perspective. So nothing is natural. Or if we can see, everything is, because it's natural, is crucified. So, however, this new spiritual movement is resenting that dualism. Another characteristic, is search for personal existential relationship with the sacred. In the stable times, says Stacy, spirituality is the personal and lived experience of the revealed mystery celebrated in religious services, prayers, liturgies, and sacraments. But people are not encouraged to discover a personal relationship with God. We may, by the fact that because we are going to the church, that because we have a pew present in front of us, that everybody has already a personal connection with God. And that was what we are celebrating. The big surprise is that maybe we have not. And those who are living our pew are experiencing that. While I am here, I am not, having any personal connection with God. And maybe this is what people are looking outside our structures. Another characteristics that define this kind of search is looking for the feminine aspects of humanity and human leadership, even in the religion. And because they say the many traditional religions appear too patriarchal. It seems to be made by men for further their own power. And in some ways, and in some religions, it's clear that it oppresses women and undermines our authority, repress feminine elements in men, and exclude the feminine dimensions in many parts of the divinity. So that's another aspect. And incarnational existential relationship with the divinity in a new integral cosmology. One of the things that is in crisis today is also the cosmology, the vision of the cosmos. We have still in our language pre-renewal, vision of the world, even though we know that in our cosmology that there is not up and down. If the sun is always turning around, and all of us, we are turning in a dynamic cosmology that we know by physics. All of our language and things that we are talking about, above and down, as a perception of positions of the things. So we are looking for a new cosmology that also makes sense for our existence and putting us as part of that cosmology. In another characteristics, we are looking for a creational-friendly religion. It's something that strikes a lot, millenniums, and many people, is why we are trying to save ourselves from many things, and the nature is following apart. So this kind of relationship that now the Pope also is proposing about the need of integrated human ecology with the ecology system. We are part of the system. How can we express that in the way we live our lives and worship God? So another questioning and characteristics is that this new spirituality is looking for holiness and integration rather than an ideal human perfection. So religion seeks in general for perception, for perfections, and sometimes people feel overwhelming by all of those moral, ethical requests for a perfection that is not like that. We are growing processually. Is moral announcement of the church or the religions able, to accompany us and say, yes, we are looking for a vision of what is good, but first start to see what we can do. We can do is progress in holiness and integration. And this, I think this is beautiful, Being perfect is not being as a goal just right now, is be related. And I think this perception is very intuitive, it's very nice. This new spirituality also sees for inner consciousness and discernment awakening rather than external hierarchical authority. Religion is seen as a hierarchical, elitist, and external force saying, you should do this. And this is the kind of perception that is seen as contrary to really human individual freedom of this desire, take decision for their own. So the secular culture, for secular culture, religion belongs to a former era in which spiritual authority was invested in authority figures like priests, bishops, clergy, and people freely gave authority to such figures in the past. But now people want to own such authority for themselves for two reasons. The inner authority, that is coming from our own possibility to take decisions, and because people no longer trust to authorities outside. This is one of the big pains in our current society, for our current culture, is we lost trust in the external structures. So this is why people is looking for the ability or some school that could teach them how to discern rather than how to follow only rules. Okay, another characteristic, we talk about this one. A path for psychological and social progress or maturity. They are looking for a kind of religion or structure or spirituality that can help them to understand practical ways to achieve that holiness that high part, that development or realization that all human beings we are looking for. So, continuing with characteristics, this spirituality is looking for something real and concrete stories, where the concrete personal stories can fit in the big pictures of the history of salvation. How my own personal, unique needs can be at the same time related with the whole history of salvation, with the whole main history that the salvation is proposing or that Revelation is proposing. I like these phrases in referring for this need. It's a religion is rejected, not because a person doesn't not believe, but because he or she is not believed. In religion, if religion expands its horizons to include the spiritual of individuals, it might be renewed by such expansions. So what today must have to do with my concrete needs in my life? How can I find a religion a solace for my economical crisis or for emotional needs? This is what people is looking for. Okay, concrete stories in the main picture of the history of salvation. Authenticity before the powers of the world. This is something also very clear. People today is protesting against many religions because they see them to compromise, that they compromise too much their values with the statement that maybe the church or the institutions, many church, in order to survive inside the other institution, had, compromised too much their own values. And people are looking for this kind of informality where at least those values could be defended. It is looking also for a sibling model of brotherhood rather than a hierarchical difference among communities, where we can see, well, here we are all together looking for salvation. They are not, more up or down. Yeah. So, in conclusion, using the words of Tese, we can say that what is common characteristic for this informal experience of spirituality is that it's a form of personal religion that in some ways is very nice because trying to connect the whole perception of salvation with the real concrete experience of the people. Is trying to connect really the nature, concreteness of each of us with the experience of salvation. But at the same time, this kind of personal experience is the triumph of this new spirituality, but it's at the same time its own limitation. Because it's hard until now to be lived as a kind of a spiritual market. People in the media and all around is looking for whatever rituals, whatever thing that could fit my personal needs. So this is also a limitation. In some ways, so this new spirituality is feeding also our very egotic perceptions of ourselves, And people that is suffering for loneliness end up in this kind of experience also being alone, looking for answers for their own spiritual needs. Okay. So, however, what kind of relationship or dialogue could we, in the new evangelization, propose to this kind of formal experience? Terms like authenticity, integrality, communion, united brotherhood, holistic things, is something that maybe is very good. Because of that, some theologians commented that we can see this new spiritual experience as a new creation-centered without being pagan, sexually alert without being pornographic, holistic without being sentimental, and a personal without being private. That could be the main values that we can identify on this kind of experience, if they are covered or take it in a positive way. So, however, there are many things still to questioning and to look out about how can we match this. In this search for new experience or possibilities, a new figure has emerged, Pope Francis. As we will briefly consider later, his sensibility for the peripheries seems to have already grasped the importance tool to connect and feel the spiritual journey behind protesters, people considered public sinners, and religious unaffiliated people. I love it. I was in Rome, the first Angelus of the Pope Francis, and comparing what was happening the years before, what was impressive for me was trying to arrive to St. Peter Plaza that day and seeing that even the Via of the Conciliation was completely covered already at 11:30 a.m. when the Angelus was at 12. And it struck me that even though with this main crowded presence, this Pope made something, a move, that for me was, wow, an hermeneutical shift for many ways. We had been for years in the church looking for language opportunities or ways to approach today people. And he made it very easy in a move. He said, I am a sinner. I am with you. This is already, changing positions to start the dialogue. So, from now, it is important to state that in the context of the new evangelization, it is our responsibility to find a new social language for this kind of spirituality. Otherwise, these millions of people will become another world of narcissism, fanatism, of self-aggrandizement of themselves. So, this is why this is a mission, to arrive to them and communicate with the kind of spirit they are looking for. So, we will see. So, let's now consider briefly, a little bit, Hispanic popular religiosity as also another main popular experience in today's U.S. religious landscape. Well, popular religiosity in Latin America now has split in two main representants. So those who are still following the traditional rites and popular and feeding their faith that way, but also the Hispanic Catholic charismatic movement. We will consider first the traditional Hispanic religiosity for see what are the characteristics in this particular way. So the traditional Hispanic religiosity or devotion is the result of centuries of intercultural dialogue between the gospel announced by missionaries from Spain and the people in every culture, and had developed in each of our countries many ways to do this encounter However, in general, we can identify as characteristics the following. We can say that it's magic. Magic in the sense that it's based more in insights than in rational perceptions. It's symbolic and rich of images because we Hispanics, we love the real contact with things. Touching, smelling is very important for us. You know, I love this sentence from Ken Davis, who says, well, that Hispanic Catholicism is so tactile. He said, thrones turn out to feel the grief of ashes, grabs the slickness of palms, sense the warmth of candles, held the weight of statues in processions. Images are caressed, kissed, and left notes down. Birds are counted, crosses are carried, breeze are beaten, and water is sprinkling. People want to touch God and be touched by God. That's real. That's part of our culture, and this is why the richness of our symbology and the importance that it has in our religiosity. Also is emotional, existential, soul and heart, and trying to combine, and in many ways had arrived to very good synthesis. Is also festive, theatrical, and fun. Talking to Irish priest in my diocese recently, he said to me, you know what, Hispanics know how to have fun with religion. Which is not necessarily what's happening, but it's very important. It's collective and politic. It's part of our identity. Politic in that way identifies us as a community, is many ways a way to defend our civil rights. And this is why it's part of our reality. So, other characteristic is its natural cosmic religiosity. What it means, this cosmic religiosity? This is a very important point. The Selam, in the final document about pastoral identity in the 70s, he said that the Hispanic popular Catholicism is a cosmic religiosity. This is a great value since helps the incarnation of faith in the natural human rhythm, but at the same time could be the big limitation. And this is actually what is happening among the new generations, among the Hispanics. So that cosmology means that harvest, normal, natural times, initiation for new age is covered by liturgy and integrated in our celebration, like quinceañeras or procession, especially in times of harvest, etc. So this is very good. The bad thing is when there is a change of a new cosmology, you know, for new generations coming in contact with the science, all of that kind of symbology doesn't make sense for them, especially for the new generation. So, however, popular religiosity have another very nice characteristic, is that it's family-based, okay? And it is a way in which tradition is passed in the intimacy of the household. And yesterday we were listening about the importance of how family, you know, is the main. So this is why, in some way, the new evangelization is done already and inside the families, and in Hispanic families where the parents are still able to share that tradition with their kids, that's important. One of the main pains for immigrants, family immigrants in the United States, and this is why also the big gap in between that generation and the kids, is that parents are talking a different language at home, parents and kids. Kids are rising in schools, speaking Spanish, speaking English, not Spanish. And parents from a very uncultured background feel even shy of their kids. There is not in some ways many common language, and kids are feeling shy because of their background, because they cannot identify anymore, being proud of that background. This big division, cultural division inside the household in Hispanics is one of the causes why we are losing also the new generation of Hispanics. Well, however, this is a very important thing to think about. It is still a very big source of evangelization in many parts among the Hispanic community. However, let's talk about the charismatic movement very quickly here. I suppose all of you are more or less familiar with what charismatic movement it is. So let's go directly to some of the characteristics. One of the main things that the charismatic movement remarks is that the spiritual charisma that the New Testament is talking about could be yours and change your life, Something that the traditional religion has reserved only for the ordained people. Charismatics mean popular, the present, popular in the sense of extended, the presence of the Holy Spirit. Preachers in the charismatic movement are so alive, so interactive, and connect the message with the real needs of people. They say, for example, here we are today praying for God because I need to understand my kids, but because we need to find jobs, because we need to, for free some soulage or stress. All of those they name concrete needs and connect people in their preaching with the normal concrete realities and needs, the personal stories, with the big story. Is rich in existential connections. In an interview made by Latino US, Marvin Martinez says that he joined the movement 7 years ago, and for him made happiness. We like to express ourselves in a different way, like applauding, laughing, and with joy. And also, a Reverend Jim Sheman, a charismatic priest and chaplain at Bronx Community College, says that traditional Catholicism just isn't connecting with the Latinos, the mystery that is celebrated. So this is why the new immigrants who needs really to be, revived in their faith and in their hope, now that they are struggling with many needs, this kind of connection is very important for them. And also, of course, everybody is invited to participate to the music, to the interactive things, and emotional and external expressions are allowed, not only coming up or down, but many bodily expressions are allowed, and that kind, in the holistic movements and the yoga, etc., in the Zen, for example, meditation, they are now explaining how important for the neurological connection with the whole inner is the kind of movements you are doing, that if you wake up and you up your hands and things in the sense that you are already connecting with something with above you, you know. Today there are many studies explaining the importance of these bodily expressions that maybe we had not been yet able to introduce formally into our religiosity, because we feel that, you know, we are maybe in that way very European expression, no? Our liturgy, even in Latin America, the formal liturgy is very formal. It's very formal. Okay, but this kind of experience in the charismatic movement allows the formal or informal to happen inside the churches. So, in fact, this charismatic movement is the most popular because all of those reasons amount to the popular Hispanic Catholicism. What kind of common elements could we find among these kind of things? This is where I want to put your attention particularly. Is, so in concluding, the worship is centering in establishing a personal connection with Christ. Among all the goods, this is what is the most important thing that everybody participating in charismatic movement is saying. Second, people move to change their lives because of the personal connections. So this is not only a kind of inner personal experience, but it has been allowed to move people forward. All the Hispanic community I had visited in many ways in my pastoral activities in the United States, if I start to talk with the persons who are participating, for example, in ministries and services and very general ways, they volunteer and serve the church, I ask them, well, how did you develop your faith? I can tell you 80% of those serving today in parishes as catechists, etc., had come from, you know, the charismatic movement. We cannot deny that this is a very powerful evangelizing force. But what I want for you to invite them is to see something that I struggled myself doing this kind of preparing this presentation. The most I start to collect characteristics, what I found is that there is a lot of common things among these three big popular experiences. Allowed spiritual spontaneity, unallowed spiritual spontaneity, personal existential connection with the Spirit, with God, feminine leadership, common, a holic, natural, supernatural looking experience. Inner conscience and discernment is allowed, and except in the popular traditional, which had been become already something part of the structure of the church in the popular religiosity in Latin America. Another characteristic is a path for healing emotions. They gave you a path. Also here. And the most beautiful thing that we are looking for a way to evangelize, isn't it? So to connect people with Christ. These three experiences had been allowed to do such an experience and outside the temple. That is another characteristic. So in some way, these three forms are unofficial, formal, informal ways to experience the Holy Spirit. So, and this is why we can say, as a conclusion of analyzing the evangelizing power, we can say, well, charismatic movement engage more in renewed experience of faith than traditional devotions, comparing them. That for youth, Hispanic generation rising in a secularized culture, the cosmological and scientific way is not helping us, of course, for youth. This is why they are, those youth that are still participating in the church is because they have received the faith in the household, through participating in family engaging activities at home, or through the religiosity, or because they have been also participating in some ways on the charismatic movement. And I am quoting this phrase from Sherry Wedding, the author of the Forming Intentional Disciples, who can summarize also what it means. So it means that the level of attendance or worship service is directly connected today with the centrality that it is possible with the centrality that is possible to find or to have a personal experience of God through any kind of service. This is the key, I think, that I found it in this different experience. So, but then, a happy new thing is also that looking about the evangelizing power of this experience, today, the Pope pastoral vision that was presented in Evangelii Gaudium explained also that a way to make an hermeneutic, an interpretation of what is going on outside our pews is this: God is at work behind popular religiosity, and he expressed that in many ways. He said, for example, that referring to Paul C's quotations, he said that everybody is thirst for God, but this thirst is something that only poor and simples are willing to know and perceive. So this is why the importance, of listening to these popular expressions. And also another way is expression of popular piety have much to teach us. Much to teach us. For those who are capable to reading them, they are a locus theologicus which demands our attention, especially in the times of the new evangelization. And also the Pope says, to understand popular piety, we need to approach it with the gaze of God Shepherd, who seeks not to judge, but to love. Today's popular spiritual experience contains a missionary power that the church should not stiffly or presume to control. Those are phrases from the Pope. Neither must be underestimated. To do so will be to fail to recognize the work of the Holy Spirit. So this is what, I am thinking that maybe we are now in a very particular moment that when at the same time we are feeling overwhelming by the challenges of the religious crisis, God is really effectively doing a spiritual job in his or her way. So, what are Pope Francis' suggestions then? So, he is very incarnational, sympathetic, committed with the human pain. This is the focus he's inviting us to have. He said there is not a message to pass, but a person to encounter, and he's repeating in this Jean Paul second expressions and Redemptorist mission, and also Pope Benedict, who says this is not, we are not calling to do a doctrinal crusade or a moral crusade. We need to invite people to connect with Christ. Joy and festive attitude should mark the style, says Pope Francis in his whole encyclical of joy of the gospel. No, the joy of the gospel in the Evangelii Gaudium. So, and what I think personally is one of our difficulties to allow joyful, expressive, emotional feelings among our liturgy is because we don't think how important joy it is to express salvation. But I telling you, for example, I am coming from Colombia, a society who had suffering in the last 60 years, dramatic, horrible, violent experience every day. Almost every family has lost someone during the past time for violent situation in a horrible, horrible things that had hurt us too much. Even though the last three research about what is the most happiest country in the world, have you heard about that? That it had been around? Colombia has owned the second place in the last 25 years. Wow, how can that be possible? And I assure you, coming back often to Colombia, what is keeping us mentally and emotionally healthy is the music. You are so sad listening all of those news and seeing things, but then a very good cumbia is out in the radio, and something new happened, really happened in you. We have in Spanish an expression in Colombia, el muerto al hoyo, el vivo al baile. So the death to the hole, and the alive people to dance. So, and I think even though it could be superficial, maybe an anthropological cultural study should be done about the importance of all of those things. And maybe now that they are neurologists are looking about the connection between movements and feelings, etc., many explanations could be found for why. So I think our Pope coming up from Latin America also, even though Argentina doesn't know how to dance, I'm so sorry. Even though, so in general, our Spanish, we can say that, but no, except the tango, of course, the tango, which is very passionate and things. But the happy music has been developed more in the Caribbean aspect, which is a mix. And that's also very beautiful. If you think all the Caribbean music is the synthesis of 5 cultures. It's a very global expression of human cultures, all together. Africa, indigenous culture, Spanish culture, Anglo culture, all instruments and things all together. That's beautiful. So, however, something could be coming out from here. So, what to do then to integrate it? And here also, and listen to this, the Pope is insisting on discernment. Now, I read the recent 200 numbers in the Amoris Laetitia. And I noticed that in the most important part of formation, the Pope is saying, do not teach the couples what to do. Let them have the Holy Spirit and teach them how to discern and find their path of the Spirit in their own daily life. That is amazing. So discernment is also a coincident language that our Pope has with all of those popular cultures. Of course, he says Jesus, who is the one in charge of the new evangelization, he is the one, so it's his job. He's so creative. And Jesus doesn't have troubles, to break our structure is needed in order to embrace people, because this is incarnation. Incarnation is a very dramatic, radical way in which God had encountered our reality, even our sin. So if God itself doesn't have trouble, so even embracing the cross, all our sins and pains, why we as a church could not do so? So this is why the Pope is so clear in his encyclical, in his letter, about what kind of attitude the church could have. He said, I prefer a church which is bruised, hurting, and dirty because it had been out of the streets, rather than the church which is unhealthy from being confined and from clinging to its own securities. And you can read more in the number 49 of Evangelii Gaudium. So another way that the Pope is proposing is, please start evangelization in the intimity of the family, and this is all about, Amoris Laetitia. So what to do? What really stay for us at this moment, at this point? Well, all the documents of the church have really saying that inculturation and not simply adaptation should be what we need to do. And it's so clear, in the Sacrosanctum Concilium number 14 to say that if after serious catechetical formation, the meaning of the liturgy is not yet, grasped by the pew, we should do everything to change those things. This is a statement, isn't it? But at the same time, the question is, so now what do we need to do? Do more catechetical formation about the liturgy and the language of the liturgy? You spend hours explaining to the kids, what it means, this sentence of the liturgy? Or we need liturgical language should be more accessible to today's people cultural range of comprehension. These are answers that I am unable to answer because only authorities, official authorities of the church, are able to define what to do in this matter. However, I tell you, from my own experience, what I see is that catechetical formation on liturgy is not enough. I think by doing all my studies, I am an example of a person who had done a lot of catechesis, received a lot of catechesis. And even though it took me years to understand that in the moment of the offertory in the Mass, it is the moment when I need to present my spiritual offer to be transformed. As Vatican II explaining beautifully in the number, which one is, now I don't remember, but in one of his number, beautiful, says that it means that in the moment of the consecration, I should put my real life, my efforts to understand my adolescent kids, my efforts to be the real connection with salvation to my husband, my efforts to do my best at work to be consecrated and united to the offer of the church. It took me years. And I see that today, I am thinking how many of the pews are really in this moment saying, oh yeah, now is the moment, to present those things. I doubt it. Why? Because even though the beautiful language of the liturgy is so beautiful and translated in our vernacular language, is not translated in our existential language. Sorry, but I feel that. So, and only as for finishing, I can tell you that one example that I get in my country for someone who really was able to do this kind of connection was a very young priest, and I finish with this because I think it's over time. This very young priest, just ordained, was sent as a pastor in a parish in downtown Cali, 3 million cities, big city, downtown, in the middle of building of offices and restaurants. He was sent there. When he arrived, 3 old ladies and some cats were in the pew. At noon mass. That was it. So, but he started to bring some alive music. He's not a charismatic, but very alive, very nice, connecting music, liturgical music. And also, during all the prayers and the liturgy, he started to introduce the existential language. He will say, for example, at the moment of the penitential rites, say, let's now ask God forgiveness for the times I didn't listen to my kids, for the times I didn't listen to my husband, for the times I saw people suffering I didn't, for the times I didn't take the telephone and call that person that now I am knowing is alone, for the time I lose in this. So they were putting words to the real feelings of people. And so on. And the mass started to long for 2 hours. And the pew started to be crowded until the point that 2 years after, it was a traffic problems in downtown because of that. They were forced to turn down the buildings in the front and build, a parking lot. So, for me, that is a clear, but however, after that, of course, the bishop and some other clerics said, no, you are not allowed to add words or extra words inside the Roman ritual. You should not, you cannot. So, he changed it, very obedient, very good clerical guy. He was obedient. He said, okay. So he preserved the Roman ritual as it is, without adding these things, and start 1 hour before the Mass to do the kind of prayers that we should be done as preparing your soul, to ask forgiveness and all the stuff. And I went to the 2 different kind of services. Of course, for those who doesn't know, they think that the Mass started at the moment the music starts, However, they are feeling that a personal encounter had happened to them. This is why all of those, secretaries and businessmen are crowded now, this kind of parish. So that's what I can tell you. Possibilities are outside. Let's listen to the Spirit being seeing how can we today be faithful to that kind of challenge of today's spirituality. Thank you.